My side band, the Gene Simmons band, happened to be playing at the same hall the night before. And the local promoter came up and said, you know, Mr. Simmons, would you mind getting all your equipment out by about 11:30? And I said, sure, that's not going to be a problem. We don't carry a lot anyway. Why? They said, well, we're wheeling in Chuck Berry's casket. And I said, oh my God, why here? And why Chuck Berry? What? They explained that the next day there was going to be, you know, the family gets their invited guests. I said, here in the concert hall? Yeah, here. So totally by happenstance. So we finished the show. I went back to the hotel and went to sleep and thinking about the great Chuck Berry. And the next day before I got into my car to go to the hotel, to go to the airport, I thought the least I could do was to show up and pay my respects. Because without Chuck Berry, without that guitar, there would be no rock and roll. So I stood in the back of the hall. Initially, nobody knew I was there, and that's well, I came for Chuck, not because look at me. And somebody from the Berry family came up and said, you know, Mr. Simmons, would you like to go up and say a few words? I said, I'm really just here to honor Chuck Berry, I didn't come here to get up and I haven't prepared anything, and it's not about me. It would do us a great honor if you would. So I think I went up as the last speaker and got so caught up emotionally about the passing of the great Chuck Berry and what it meant to me. Never mind all of pop culture and guitars and rock and roll and the Beatles and the Stones and even Jimi Hendrix. It was the first artist, and then later on I found Little Richard and so on and so forth. But originally it was Chuck Berry and the way he played guitar and those 1-4-5 chords based around blues, but it wasn't blues, it moved. And the lyrics weren't about, I left my baby, now I'm gonna cry in my beer, and so on and so forth. And because she loved me and I don't know, she's not near. You know, you can tell what a blues song is going to be like. He sang about freedom and he actually sang in the third person about being, you know, Johnny be good. And the artist and the songs started to become one, if you know what I mean. Those lyrics sounded like Chuck Berry. They didn't sound like the Carpenters or even the Beatles. Those lyrics were Chuck Berry. I could hear the authenticity of those lyrics. Kiss would never have been here without Chuck Berry. Many bands couldn't be here without Chuck Berry. The way the guitar sounded, a little distorted from the amp, the way your pinky moved left and right, you know, that movement, it became the backbone of that music. And the sus-4s that Keith Richards and those guys made popular, you hear it in Chuck's music. All that stuff happened. And of course there are other great players. When I think of B.B. King, I think of those notes, not of chords. Chuck was the chug-a-lug, was the train on the railroad track. When you think about the wide variety of bands stylistically that kept pointing publicly to Chuck Berry, is you've got the trashy MC5 that, you know, just came out of the streets, never quite made it. And you've got the Beatles and the Stones at the height of popularity, as big as you can get, and all sorts of other artists in different levels with different styles that kept doing Chuck Berry songs. Something about that, something about the DNA of what Chuck did with his guitar, those chords, 1-4-5 chords, that was the basis of blues, and yet when Chuck played it, it was rock and roll.
I really want to talk about this, although this isn't going to be about racism. But
it is.
It is.
Of course it is. Anybody with a darker skin tone just wasn't accepted. In the South, your life was in danger. And the South still has not come to grips with that, has never stood up and said, you know, I'm sorry, we were jackasses. I never thought of color when I thought of Chuck Berry. He was just the great Chuck Berry. I didn't think black, white, it didn't come into it. And maybe that's the magic of that music and the person, that he was able to crawl into the ears and the hearts and minds of little white kids who again normally would never have heard this music.